Hello subscribers, welcome to the fourth video in the series going over the Apocrypha. Reminder for anyone just tuning in, I am going through every book of the Apocrypha which I've never read before, trying to determine whether or not it should be canon. First, going just by my initial impression upon reading it, then doing some research and figuring out what arguments are out there for or against it. And this one could be a bit more difficult than the others, as I'm going over wisdom, which, just by the looks of it and the sound of the title, just sounds like a Proverbs offshoot or spin-off, or I don't know. I don't even know who wrote wisdom or when it was written. I have not looked into that yet. But unless it makes some really bold claim or something, I don't know what I'm going to have to say about it. So I'll just get started, and it's got 19 chapters, and we'll see how far I get before I have anything to say on it. Okay, well, I guess I have something to say on first chapter. First, it doesn't, how do I put it? The structure does seem different than Proverbs. Like, wisdom so far seems more like an essay that's trying to link one thought with the next, where Proverbs is just saying after saying after saying. So it does read differently, though it was still difficult for me to read and follow. Verses 13 through 15. For God made not death, neither hath he pleasure in the destruction of the living. I'm not exactly disagreeing with that, but it did please him to break Jesus. I forget the exact wording of the verse I'm thinking of. It pleased him to crush him, however it was phrased. But I don't think it would be accurate to put those two verses against each other. For he created all things that they might have their being, and the generations of the world were healthful, and there is no poison of destruction in them, nor the kingdom of death upon the earth. But there is sin. Is sin not a poison of destruction? I don't know. I am assuming I'm just misunderstanding the writer's intent in that. And then, for righteousness is immortal, verse 15. That's just odd. Nothing really wrong so far. Just a little oddity. A good hermeneutic that people should have is, especially when the language is archaic, to just give them the benefit of the doubt and assume you are misunderstanding something and they are not contradicting something else. Because even if I think the specific uses of the words are contradicting other verses, the overall intent of the passage seems more consistent. Okay, a couple notes on chapter 2. First, it starts by saying, for the ungodly said. That's important because I almost completely discounted all of wisdom because of what it said, because I had forgotten that the chapter started with for the ungodly said, because it was saying a bunch of ungodly stuff. But verse 16 through 20, we got some good stuff here. We are esteemed of him as counterfeits. This is the ungodly person speaking of the righteous man. He abstaineth from our ways as from filthiness. He pronounceth the end of the just to be blessed, and maketh his boast that God is his Father. Let us see if his words be true, and let us prove what shall happen in the end of him. For if the just man be the Son of God, he will help him. It takes you back to the cross where the scoffers say, if you're the Son of God, get yourself down from there. Help him and deliver him from the hand of his enemies. Let us examine him with despitefulness and torture, that we may know his meekness and prove his patience. Let us condemn him with a shameful death, for by his own saying he shall be respected. So that right there, I would say, is a point in favor of wisdom being canon. So far, it's off to a good start. Alright, in chapter 4, this part got confusing. Verse 9, but wisdom is the gray hair unto men, and an unspotted life is old age. He pleased God. I do not know who that he is. I do not know who that is referring to. And was beloved of him, so that living among sinners, he was translated. Now, if you stop there, it almost sounds like he could be speaking about Jesus until you get to the next verse. Yea, speedily was he taken away, lest that wickedness should alter his understanding, or deceit beguile his soul. Clearly not talking about Jesus. I assume it's speaking about understanding, or wisdom, I mean. He being made perfect in a short time, fulfilled a long time, for his soul pleased the Lord, therefore hasted he to take him away from among the wicked. This the people saw, and understood it not. Neither laid they up this in their minds, that his grace and mercy is with the saints, and that he hath respect unto his chosen. That grace and mercy is with his saints sounds a bit New Testament-y. Already, 3 of the Apocrypha have been, or 4 technically, have been written late, where the best we could say about them is that the earliest manuscripts are in Greek, even if they were written in Hebrew. So that's not looking good, and it doesn't help that I cannot follow what is going on here. I actually prefer Proverbs writing style to wisdom, because Proverb doesn't expect you to follow along, but this, it's like it's expecting you to follow along, but it's not giving you a narrative to follow along with. It just makes it very difficult to actually follow, especially if your mind keeps wandering. All right, here's something interesting. Chapter 5, verse 18. He shall put on righteousness as a breastplate, and true judgment instead of a helmet. He shall take holiness for an invincible shield. His severe wrath shall he sharpen for a sword, and the world shall fight with him against the unwise. So do we think that Paul got inspiration from this for his armor of God passage? And it has to be just inspiration, because they are different. I think breastplate is the only one that's actually the same. But that also brings up a question. If we consider this canon, or we're considering this for canon, is it an issue if these 2 armor of God passages contradict each other? Because they do say very different things, but they're not... But it's like using the same analogy in 2 different ways. Is that something we can allow? After all, I do think they are armors for different people. Paul's armor of God is for the Christian to wear, and this armor is, as far as I can tell, armor that God wears. At least as far as I can tell. Though that seems odd to put God in armor like this. Although this last phrase, and the world shall fight with him against the unwise, that is genuinely confusing. Because the world and the unwise should be the same. The world is unwise. Okay, I know I'm just nitpicking here, but for they that kept holiness holily shall be judged holy, and they that have learned such things shall find what to answer. Come on, is that even proper English? For they that keep holiness holily shall be judged holy. Here's something I didn't expect. And in my mother's womb was fashioned to be flesh in the time of 10 months, being compacted in blood of the seed man and pleasure that came with sleep. So that's not 9 months. So we have a few options here. Option A, people actually took longer to give birth back then? I doubt it. I don't remember ever hearing anything about that. Option B is that the writer just didn't know somehow, as if they just weren't counting months accurately. Which brings me to option C, is that much in the same way that Hebrew days tend to be evening and morning, so you count any part of a day as the whole day, something similar could be happening with months, which would get them to 10 months. And what option am I on? D? Is that it's just false. So I think option C is the only viable option to keep wisdom in canon. Which it is a viable option, I think. But we'll see. I will say that whoever wrote Wisdom might be taking it a bit far. He's glazing up wisdom a bit much. Like, it's starting to feel like worship at this point. Like, if it is possible to praise wisdom too much, then I think it happens here. But that is the question. Is it possible to praise wisdom too much? But at least he's not making God subservient to wisdom or anything like that. So I'm not prepared to throw any accusations out. Just something to keep in mind. All right. Speaking of glazing wisdom too much, chapter 8, verse 2, I loved her and sought her out from my youth. I desired to make her my spouse, and I was a lover of her beauty. Speaking of wisdom, come on, man. There is a limit to how much you should praise abstract concepts such as wisdom. In fact, there's a limit to how much you should praise just about anything. In fact, there are probably ways of praising God which are inappropriate. And this is borderline inappropriate. In chapter 9, verse 4, the person is praying to God about giving him wisdom. Give me wisdom that sitteth by thy throne, and reject me not from among thy children. The constant personification of wisdom that he's doing, it's just too much. This author needs to learn that less is more. Once you've started saying that wisdom sits by the throne of God, you're just going too far. Verse 8 of the same chapter, thou hast commanded me to build a temple upon thy holy mount. So I haven't really talked about this, but is it Solomon who wrote wisdom? If it can be shown that Solomon is indeed the writer of wisdom, that would be strong consideration for canon. In spite of all the complaints I've had so far, that'd probably be the strongest consideration for canon that I could think of for this, if Solomon actually wrote it. And it does make some sense that Solomon wrote it. He spoke about wisdom and personified wisdom in Proverbs, so it somewhat fits, though I don't particularly like the writing style in this one. Chapter 10, 1 through 7, keeps talking about historical people, like Adam and Cain and I think Abraham, and Noah. The problem is he's not using any of their names. So it's pretty unusual way to speak about them. It's just first formed father of the world, the Adam, and then murdered his brother, that's Cain. It wasn't quite clear, not 100% clear, when the shift happened from Adam to Cain, but there was a shift here. But when the unrighteous, so apparently the unrighteous is Cain. It just makes it harder to follow when he doesn't use names. And again, it's just unusual to not use names when he's quite clearly speaking about real people. And it continued doing that all through Wisdom 10, speaking very obviously about other historical people, all the way up to Moses at the end of the chapter, but never using any of their names, just referring them as the righteous man. And if it ever talks about somebody like Cain, and call him the unrighteous man. And I lost track at this point. But is he still praying? I've complained about this type of prayer before, where he's just stating to God what God has done. But I'm not 100% certain that he is still praying, or if the narrative switched at some point and I missed it because it's not much of a narrative at all, just an essay of some sort. Chapter 11, verse 24 and 25 seems to have something to say about Calvinism, though I'm not sure where it would land. For thou lovest all the things that are, and abhorrest nothing which thou hast made. For never wouldest thou have made anything if thou hadst hated it. And how could anything have endured if it had not been thy will, or been preserved if not called by thee? I'm not entirely certain how to compare that with Calvinism, but it's saying something, one way or the other. Okay, I just have to complain for a second here. This is something that I've felt like I noticed all throughout Wisdom, but it's hard to describe. just the way it's almost like a run-on sentence. Just constantly continuing the thought with for this and therefore that and but and just going on and on. It's like reading an ancient Jordan Peterson. I barely know what's even being said because it's just what's the phrase? Not verbal diarrhea, though that might be an accurate description. Stream of consciousness, that's what I'm getting at. It's like some sort of stream of consciousness just going on and on and on. It just makes it very difficult to read. Finally, done. That was a pain. This is like the third recording I've made because I keep falling asleep trying to read this. Which of course means I may not remember everything I've read. I don't remember what I've said already in the past 2 videos I've recorded for this. But as far as I can tell, giving the benefit of the doubt, I assume this was written by Solomon, probably in his younger years before he knew how to write, because 90% of this book is just a run-on sentence. There's a bunch of punctuation, but most of that punctuation means nothing. I can't think of anything blatantly wrong, and there's certainly a bunch of stuff I saw that were consistent with the Bible, but I could hardly even follow it most of the time. So if there was something wrong in there, I would not be surprised if I didn't see it. So now I will go and look up any arguments there are for wisdom and see what the actual history is of it and what arguments there are for or against. See you in a second.
Later.
Okay, according to Got Questions, even the Catholic Church does not believe Solomon wrote the book, which dates back to the 1st or 2nd century BC. Now, since it does not claim to be written by Solomon, this does not immediately discount it for being canon, but it does eliminate the strongest reason to have supported it for canon. Yeah, and we noticed this part while reading it. While Solomon wrote much on the subject of wisdom in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, he never elevated it to the status of part of the Godhead, a philosophy found in the Wisdom of Solomon. I certainly noticed that while reading it. So, I'm watching this video, and one of the main points it brings up is that books are chosen, not by the Catholic Church, but by Protestants, based, at least in part, by whether or not they're in the Hebrew Bible. And I bring this up because it reminds me of but I forgot his last name. Capturing Christianity's response, where he strawmanned how Protestants could possibly choose what's in the Bible. He said things like, if it's written by a known author or known to be written by apostle or whatever his arguments were that he could easily knock down. But he didn't bring up this seemingly important tidbit, that one of the considerations for canon is that it's in the Hebrew Bible. So if the Jews do not consider it canon, maybe we should not either, up until the New Testament, obviously. So I went to Catholic Answers to try and find some argument why wisdom should be canon, and Catholics seem opposed to giving arguments for any one book. It's like they want to defend all the Deuterocanon at once, but not individual books in the Deuterocanon, which makes it very hard to do this kind of research. But reading this article just titled Book of Wisdom, that it didn't really give a defense of why the Book of Wisdom should be in canon, but to me it certainly gave some arguments against it. For instance, in this paragraph, of course the fact that the entire Book of Wisdom was composed in Greek rules out its Solomonic authorship. It is indeed true that ecclesiastical writers of the 1st century commonly assumed this authorship on the basis of the title of the book, apparently confirmed by those passages, which I'll look at in a second, well, one of them anyway, where the one speaking is clearly Solomon. And yeah, I probably looked at this when I was looking at chapter 9, and of course that was like 2 recordings ago. But thou hast chosen me to be a king of thy people and a judge of thy sons and daughters. Wisdom is not canon. It is claiming to be written by Solomon, and it is not. It is consistent with scripture in a lot of places, but it also deifies wisdom, but also speaks about wisdom as female So you can't say, oh, when he's speaking of deifying wisdom, he's speaking of Christ. You can't do that. The unknown author of wisdom has not left that possibility open. This book is badly written. It has problematic theology, and it straight up lies to you about who the author is. And it's not even considered canon by the Hebrews. The only argument the Catholics even put forward, and the one video I saw on this didn't even mention the Book of Wisdom, but I assume the argument is the same, is that a bunch of church fathers spoke about certain books as though they were scripture, which is not a very strong argument. I don't care that the church fathers thought they were scripture. I want to know why they thought they were scripture. They are not infallible. If you show me Jesus considering any of these books to be scripture, then you have something. I wouldn't need to know the reason Jesus considered them scripture, so long as you can convince me that he really thought they were scripture. But I have not seen anything like that for any of the books I've covered so far. And honestly, I am glad that Wisdom is not canon, because it is a pain to read, and I would not want to have to study it any further. And I don't care if that makes me sound biased. Regardless of my bias, I have put forth much better reasons to discount this as canon than I've heard from any Catholic to accept it as canon. So the next book is Syriac. Oh, come on! Oh, this is... no. 51 chapters. I really hope those are short chapters. This next one's gonna be a pain. See you then.